Right, this is Chapter 41, Part 4. We'll be taking a look at the purchase of stock. All right. Up to this point, we've looked at the purchase of assets. Now we're going to take a look at the purchase of stock. And you realize the purchase of stock is about control. It's about taking corporate control. And in the corporate world, purchases can be friendly or they can be hostile. We're going to take a look at a more hostile transaction referred to as a takeover. All right. So a takeover, when someone wants to take control, they will make a public offer to buy the stock. That is called a tender offer. All right. This offer will be addressed to the shareholders. They could make the offer in a very public way. You know, in the past, they might use a large advertisement in a newspaper such as the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and just put out a call to shareholders. You know, we want to buy your stock, right? They will the company that wants to acquire the stock, they will offer to purchase those shares at a higher than market price. So that will attract shareholders. All right. And sometimes this offer to purchase the shares, though, will be conditioned on receiving agreement from a certain number of shares, a certain number of shares or shareholders that represent a certain number of shares, because they want to be able to take control. Right. And so, if you're familiar with some of the depictions of in the movies, you may have seen the movie Wall Street. I mean, that's an old movie now. And just for your kind of viewing pleasure, I put a little clip up from Wall Street. I believe I probably attached it to a later module, but I just thought of that right now. All right. You may have just followed some of this in the business news. We don't see as many hostile takeovers. At least I don't hear so much about them in the news. But there was a period of time, I would say several decades ago, where it was pretty common that you'd hear about one corporation trying to buy out and take over another corporation, and then the defenses that would be raised. All right. So once a board learns about this offer to buy shares from the shareholders, the board can take some action. All right. The board can either agree, maybe they consent to it. All right. But if they want to defend themselves, and this is what we're paying attention to here in this section, then there are several defenses that the board can adopt. All right, there's a list of these defenses in your textbook. I'm going to go out to your textbook just so you can see where it is. All right, but out of the 6 defenses that are listed on that chart, I am only requiring that you learn 3. All right, and those 3 are here on the slide. They are golden parachute, poison pill, and white knight. All right, we'll come back in a moment and talk about each of those as a defense, but let me go out just so I can show you where this is in your textbook. All right, Exhibit 41-3. I'll switch to your textbook. Let me get it. Here we go. All right, it looks like this in the electronic version, so it's not all fully there until you open it up by hitting this plus sign, enlarging the table, but you can get kind of the gist of it by seeing what's there presently. All right, so this is a good, helpful, steady tool, unless you want to, make your own flashcards. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. All right, so the 3 defenses that I asked you to learn, notice they each have a quite colorful term. I think for the law, these are probably the most descriptive terms I have come across. All right, so what are they? We have, first of all, the golden parachute. Now, the golden parachute is a policy adopted by the board, and what it pretty much does is that it will give the directors, the high-level officers of the corporation, a very, very good severance package, so that if the takeover is successful, that and the board finds, members of the board find themselves, kicked out, officers find themselves let go, they will land softly. They have a parachute to help them when they are booted from the company. All right, so we call it a golden parachute. Right? And what that ultimately does then is it makes the merger expensive. All right, whoever's coming in now and plans to give the boot to some of these leaders of the corporation, they're going to have to pay to get them to leave. All right, second, defense is the poison pill. The poison pill, again, pretty descriptive, right? It's again a set of policies that the board can adopt. And what it does is that it will increase the price of the shares should the takeover be successful. So again, increased price, that means that when the hostile company comes in and they are buying shares, they're going to have to pay more under the terms of the poison pill. Right? And then the third takeover defense is the white knight. All right, the white knight is an image from literature. All right, we always think of the good guy, right, wearing a white hat. All right, and I guess in the King Arthur's court, the white knight would be the one that fights on the side of truth and justice. That kind of idea. All right, so the white knight is someone that's going to come in, a company that may come in and come to the rescue of the target corporation. All right, so it could be that the white knight comes in and is friendlier to the target corporation and brings an infusion of cash to the transaction, invest in the targeted corporation so that it can withstand now, okay, perhaps use the cash to buy up shares themselves and keep them from the aggressor corporation. And so what's going on really is that the targeted corporation has made an alliance, has a friend out there that wants to help them to withstand the takeover. So please make note of these new terms. Probably you won't need to spend a whole lot of time because you might have already gotten a sense of what each of them mean, all right, while I was talking about them. All right, so I'm going to end here. Whoops. And in our next video, we'll pick up with the termination of a corporation.